Hello and welcome back to Ambition. Woohoo!
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex.
And this is Tiffany.
You can't do it without the little woohoo. You just can't.
No, sorry guys. This is all you're gonna get.
Hi, everybody. So welcome to the podcast today. We've got a great guest for you. She's called Leila Green, and she's an Oxford graduate and top 100 female entrepreneur. She started her first business in her early 20s, but in 2021, her life took a turn when she naturally conceived triplets. After a challenging start to motherhood with premature babies in the hospital for weeks, Leila reached a breaking point and took radical steps to overcome mum guilt. Now she shares a 4-step model for breaking up with mum guilt through empowering events that have been featured by the BBC, The Guardian, Stylist, and more. Leila has built the F Mum Guilt movement, a supportive community for mums prioritising their well-being. She lives in Beckenham, South London, with her husband, triplets, and their whippet Wilbur. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome, Leila. 3 kids and a dog. I mean, are you all right?
I know. I mean, I wouldn't advise getting a dog if you have triplets, but he came first, so he was part of the deal.
Wow, I love that. I'm an animal lover as well, but the most I can do is borrow my doggy. Before I had kids, I was like,
yeah. It's a commitment.
It really
And I keep thinking I want one, and then I'm like, oh,
yeah.
How do you juggle that as well?
It's a big commitment. So before, when I was working, I was running my own business, which meant that I could take my dog to work. So it was quite flexible. But if you're not in that kind of organization, they can't really be left for more than a few hours. So it's just when you think you're getting the freedom from children, then you just sort of take it away again with the dog. It's probably not advisable.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, obviously being a mom, I know you have 3 children, all the same age, or like going through the same stages, which is mind-blowing. I'm interested to know, like, in the plethora of all the things that mothers struggle with, why did you kind of zero in on mum guilt as something you want to like advocate for and kind of speak into?
I think because I felt it the strongest.
Okay.
So I was kind of taken aback by it, because I think before you become a mum, there's all of this stuff going on in your street, in your community, like in the culture, and it sort of passes you by a bit. And it's only when you actually take that step into motherhood that you experience the judgment. For instance, everyone's got such strong opinions on whether you should breastfeed, whether you should bottle feed, whether you should co-sleep. And I saw Alex's post about that the other day, everything, weaning, should you do this type of weaning or that type of weaning? And I felt overwhelmed by all of this noise of opinions. And like all mums, I just wanted to try and get it right. Mm-hmm. And I was looking over here and this person was saying, well, you've got to do it this way. And look over there. And then that person's like, no, that's only a terrible mum would do it that way. This is the way to do it. And I think for a new mum coming into it, it's bamboozling. And, with our kind of like Google culture, you can Google an opinion and the counter opinion just as much. And you end up lost in a web of trying to work out what's actually going to work for you and your family. So even preparing for my kids before they arrived, I felt guilty. I felt guilty when I went into John Lewis and I didn't know what the hell all these gadgets and gizmos were. That, my mum never had this stuff in the 80s. Like, life was simple back then. I think they might have had a baby monitor, but they certainly didn't have, any of these fancy things. And the way in which it's sold to you, like the people who write the copy for these baby products, they're really fear selling. I suggested to my mother-in-law that she buy a mattress for one of the cots, and I'd sent a link to the John Lewis basic cot mattress, whatever it was. And she replied straight away saying, I've done my research and I don't think that's safe.
Oh my God.
Come on, there is no way that John Lewis would sell an own brand mattress that's not safe. But what it is that the people that write the copy for the mattresses that are £200-300 more, they know how to hit you in that Achilles. And then it's like, you feel like, well, if I want my child to be safe, I have to buy the most expensive car seat. If I want my child to have a good night's sleep, I need to drop £500 on a mattress. It's like, none of this stuff matters. So I was feeling a bit kind of stressed about it before.
Actually, if you've got to do it times 3.
Yeah, I was feeling a bit stressed about it before they even arrived. And then when they first came, they were in hospital for quite a long time. So I had 2 of them in for 4 weeks and 1 of them in for 5 weeks. And so every day I was saying goodbye to them. And like the guilt, as Alex might remember, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And you know that you have to do it, and you're kind of watching the clock, and your hospital parking is going to run out at a certain point, and they somehow seem to know, and they would like squeeze your fingers extra tight, like just before you left. Like Rafa would do that, one of mine. And it's heartbreaking. And then, you know, I'd be at home setting my alarm for the middle of the night to pump, because that's when you have the best supply, apparently. And I'd be calling the hospital just to see how they are. And it felt so wrong. You know, I felt so guilty that they were so fragile and like still trying to work out how to breathe and live and, you know, or feed, like all the basic stuff. And I wasn't with them.
Yeah, I felt guilty that I had relatively okay night's sleep during that point in time, because I was on the ward where nobody had any babies. They were all in the special care unit. But yeah, I felt really guilty that I was sort of going back there to sleep, and like maybe like the nurses and stuff on the unit might be judging me for not sitting there all night.
Yeah, I mean, the judgment thing's real. So luckily I had some lovely nurses on the baby unit, and they did actually say to me, they were kind of like friendly grandmas who'd put their arm around you and say like, you look tired, you look like you need to go home and have a rest now, you need to recover. And sometimes, you know, we don't think about our own well-being and our own welfare, and the fact that like we just had major surgery because we're so focused on the health of our baby. You know, that is the only thing that matters in that moment. So I had quite a heavy dose of guilt in the first few weeks after they were born. And then after 4 weeks, one of them stayed in, 2 of them were discharged. And that was like a mum guilt pressure cooker, because if I'm at home with the 2 who are kind of healthier but don't have professionals around them, then I'm feeling guilty for not being with the one who's weaker but does have teams of amazing medics looking after him round the clock. And especially when it came to feed times, because they were on similar feed schedules, I couldn't be in 2 places at once.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try and breastfeed everybody, and I wanted to try and give everyone a fair shot. And it just felt like I was failing, because they have the same needs as any other baby. And at best, I was meeting a third of them. And to be honest, I probably wasn't even doing that. And it just felt like I was always failing. You know, I was always on the back foot. Like I was never good enough. And I was almost in a situation where I was set up to fail, because, you know, you can't be in 2 places at once. You're either with this child in this hospital or you're with these children at home. You can't. And because of COVID, they wouldn't even let me bring the 2 that had been discharged back onto the ward to see their brother, because it was so, it's almost like quarantine, you know, they were so strict about germs coming in and all that kind of thing. So it was really, really tricky, that period of just feeling like I'm always letting someone down.
Yeah. It sounds like it sounds to me like because of your experiences, you've had to create this bulletproof way of looking at your motherhood narrative and your story, because otherwise the other option that you just feel bad all the time and you'll have a terrible time.
Yeah. And that is what my reality was. So for the first few months when I had them home, I was doing 24 feeds every 24 hours. I was just absolutely exhausted. Like I'm normally someone who's mentally quite strong, and I'm good in challenges, and I'm resilient. I've been through really hard things in my life and all the rest of it. But just the chronic fatigue, you know, it gets you at the end of the day. And when you're in those tired moments, like I found that that's when the mum guilt would really come for me. It's almost like, you know, a bully that knows how to kick you when you're down. It's when you're feeling defeated and you're feeling like you're letting your babies down and they're all screaming at once and you don't know what to do.
And
You
you're
can't remember who you fed.
exhausted.
And and even just basic things are so hard when you're that tired. Like even just making a cup of tea, I can remember like finding that challenging and thinking, come on, you've done this for decades. You can do this, come on. But your brain is just so tired. Your body is so tired, you can't do any of that stuff. So after a few months, I realized by letting my inner critic and that mum guilt be so prominent, it was having a net negative effect on me. It was just making me feel worse in an already challenging situation. It wasn't giving me extra capacity. It wasn't giving me a third boob so I could feed all my babies at the same time. All it was,
even nothing but taking everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's just making me feel worse when I'm doing my best here. You know, like all new mums, I think we all feel slightly out of our depth, but we're doing our best. And we're trying to kind of learn on the job, and it's the most important job you've ever had, and it's really hard and you're exhausted and you can't remember what you've done, and it's just kind of like a toxic pressure cooker for that inner critic. And then, you know, when you happen to go on your phone and have a look on Instagram, everyone else seems to be killing it, and you're like, well, how come my house doesn't look like that? Like, how come I can't get my kids in like cute matching outfits, which like a lot of the kind of twins and triplet accounts, they're all in these like perfectly matching outfits. And like my kids would just vom or, you know, have nappy explosions. Like, even if they'd start the day in the same outfits, that washing machine was on constantly.
That's such a good point, you know, what you say there about starting today and like, because I imagine one of the joys you get is maybe dressing them up in all the same thing, right? But I imagine that doesn't last for very long because someone will ruin their outfit and then they'll have to change.
Someone will
change all three of them, or do you
absolutely obliterate another baby grow?
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes, you know, they mess each other up because they're in a cot right next to each other. So
wow.
that's another unhealthy kind of benchmark. But yeah, I just had a moment where I was giving myself such a hard time. I was sat in the armchair and I was completely defeated. I think I was probably pumping at the time because that was the only time I gave myself to sit down, and just feeling like I can't do this. Like I'm going to fail. I just don't know how I'm going to be able to meet the needs of these babies. I'm not a good mum. I'm not going to be able to be a good mom. Like I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And in those really dark moments, letting that inner critic, that mum guilt, dominate that conversation was so unhealthy. And I noticed that the language I was using was really mean. And it wasn't really my language, it was my dad. So my dad had narcissistic personality disorder, which meant that at times he had been quite a bully towards my mum. And I'd seen the impact that had on her, that she kind of lost her confidence in things that I knew she was good at, and it affected her decision making. And she became kind of isolated from her friends. She left a career that she absolutely loved, which thankfully she later went back to. And I kind of realized that now we're not in those same kind of external abusive relationships with a guy who might be telling us that we're no good and that we don't deserve any time to do our own activities, to see our friends, that we should be at home. We've kind of just internalized all of that. And for instance, when I asked another mum friend if she wanted to come to a yoga class with me, it wasn't her partner saying, you don't deserve to go out to a yoga class, you need to be at home cooking, cleaning, the rest of it. She'd actually kind of internalized all of this. So she was making those excuses herself. And I know her partner because we're close, and I know it's not coming from him. So that was a weird realization, that having kind of grown up with this environment where my mum was very limited and suffered mental health issues from being around someone who basically told her that she wasn't good enough and made her believe she wasn't good enough. And then I had this like, oh my God moment where I was like, Jesus, we're doing it to ourselves now. Wow. Like, that's not right.
And you suddenly realized it was kind of his voice you were hearing.
Yeah, because I think in those dark moments, it's not necessarily even things that we rationally think. Like we might say, I know you always get that wrong, when, you know, rationally and logically, we don't actually think that we always get that wrong. We know that we have managed to feed babies before and it's been okay, but it's just in those moments, the language and the way that we're thinking isn't ours. I think sometimes it's the external becomes internalized. And this also happens with judgment. Like mums are judged on everything from the way they look, you know, what food they feed their babies, what pram they buy, like everything. And even if you don't actually logically, consciously agree with those judgments, you end up absorbing them and internalizing them. So for instance, I don't actually think that a good mum has a tidy house, but there's something in me that when I see all the perfect homes with the mums in Instagram, I think they're doing better than I am, because my home's covered in Lego bricks and pasta sauce up the wall and bits of fruit that's fallen down the back of the sofa or whatever, you know, like that's just my life. So I think
what's same.
Is
Let's just get it out there.
Yeah, exactly. You know, there's just so much of this judgment out there that even if it's stuff that we don't actually agree with, we end up just sort of absorbing it, and it's so unhealthy.
I think I really like what you said about this. We've almost created a critic.
Yeah, I think we have.
Yes. I'm currently reading Solve for Happy by Mo Goldat. I hope I'm saying his name right. So he was the ex-Google strategy officer, chief strategy officer, and he sadly lost his son. So he went on his journey to find happiness, right? Despite that in his life. And he was talking about our brains and the voices we hear, and this idea of separating those voices from us, because a lot of us think you know, those are our thoughts, but actually, why don't you think, you know, that's just a thought that's been presented to me? And I like the fact that you've almost created this person, so at least you can now separate that person from you, and then maybe talk back to that person almost, which sounds mad. Don't go mad, please.
No, it is exactly that, because it's like it's a fight, you know. I'm stepping up to that and saying no. Like, don't come in my head and give me this now. That's not helping me, and it's not helping my children. You know, you have to sort of, it's almost like you're watching a fight and you've got to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's so much against mums, these huge expectations of society, these huge judgments that, you know, if we don't take a stand, it's going to be like a tidal wave that just sweeps us down, because we can never keep everyone happy. We can never meet everyone's expectations. We can never do things the way everyone else wants us to do it, you know. So I think it's really important that we do push back.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole with wake windows. So Ted wasn't a great sleeper, and at first I was pretty laid back. I was like, oh, he'll just sleep when he's tired, it's fine. And then I discovered wake windows and I was like, he hasn't been to sleep for like 3 hours. Oh my God, this doesn't tally with how long he should be awake. So then I got completely obsessed with he should be sleeping for these times, and was beating myself up about, oh my God, I've just let him sit there awake for 3 hours. What a terrible parent. He needs to sleep and I need to help him sleep. And all of that kind of negative self-talk.
Yeah.
And for me as well, I had quite a lot of anxiety about Ted and his health, because what he'd been through, and doing things right, because when I discovered at 20 weeks that there was something wrong with him, the first thing I said to them was, is it because I was like 37 at that point, is it because I'm old? You know, and so even then, even though I'd like not touched caffeine or alcohol or anything, and I'd taken my folic acid, I still looked for something for it to be my fault. So it's scary that you can, you know, where now rationally, I know it was just happenstance.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, so I'd had 2 miscarriages before I had this pregnancy, so I was very anxious, you know, going into every scan, because you remember the bad news, don't you?
Yeah.
And so I was anxious anyway, but then when they told me it was a really high risk pregnancy, and in one of our first scans, I think the 12-week scan, it lasted 3.5 hours, and I actually had a panic attack in the scan, because I was just so desperate for them to tell me the babies were going to be okay. And they wouldn't say anything until their boss came in at the end. And then when their boss came in, it's just, you know, no bedside manner and rattling off like, you've got high risk of this horrendous thing that you never have heard of before could be coming your way. And then it was just really terrifying that you kind of feel like, I've got to make sure that I get everything right, because everything's against me. But actually, when I had got assigned a proper consultant who stayed with me for the rest of the pregnancy. She was really cool, and she was like, look, if something's going to go wrong, it's not because of anything you've done. And putting yourself on bed rest for however many weeks or months, like some mums do, she said, it's not going to help you. You're just going to have too much time on your hands to get worried about it. Just do everything normal, you know, just get back to your normal life. And if something happens, it's kind of not on you. And that was really liberating, because I feel like she's a specialist in multiple pregnancies, so she's probably seen the ones that have gone wrong as well as the ones that have ended happily, like mine. And to just sort of get that free pass, it gives you a sigh of relief, where you think, actually, you know, that there are so many genetic things and complicated things in bodies that I don't even understand. I'm not a medic, and if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen whether I quit my gym membership, or whether I go to work, whether I stay at home, whether I travel. So actually, when you start sort of assuming responsibility and blame for everything, you can't do anything, you know, even if you just sat in a perfect sort of clinical situation for your whole pregnancy, you know, things can still go wrong. So I think that's a really important one. And actually, in my first Mum Guilt event I did, the first person to speak, who's just a member of the audience, spoke about the guilt she felt of having a stillbirth. And, you know, often there is absolutely nothing that mums can do differently for miscarriage, for stillbirth, for complications, you know, problems that may arise in the early days and weeks of the baby's lives. We feel the onus of responsibility.
But
really it's not something we've done.
Yeah, it's really sad, isn't it? I think it's just so much out there. I think, like you said, it's the barrage of the social media, whatever. It's just so much out there that I think because we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, this person's we haven't got that, and I think we just get to the point where, like, oh, it must be my fault, then, you know, they must be doing better. So I just think it's really hard. But it's sad. It's sad that she felt like that. Very, very sad. I hope she's obviously hopefully in a better place.
Yeah, I mean, she did say it was just in her darker moments, but I think, you know, even this is kind of what I was saying before, like, even when logically, rationally, we know it's not our fault, there will still be moments where the cloud comes over you and you think, is it because I did this? Is it because my stress levels around my miscarriage? I had quite a stressful point in my life, and I was doing a lot with my business. Me and my husband did have a conversation, like, is it because your stress levels are too high? And it could have been, like, I don't know, you know, at that point in time, I didn't have any evidence either way. And then later on, we did have some tests done, and it was a genetic thing, so it wouldn't have mattered what my job was. But yeah, it can be very difficult for us to feel responsible for things that are outside of our control, which I think continues through motherhood. Like, when our kids are making mistakes, having accidents, you know, all of these things that we might take responsibility for, which mums I've spoken to have said it just goes on. Like, even when your kids are kind of young adults and, you know, they're in rocky relationships, or they're, you know, making dubious life choices, you still feel like, oh, is it because of something I've done?
It's hard. I'd love to know that. I mean, I know you, because one thing I get from you is that you're quite a confident person, and it probably is a combination of the things you've been through in life. You've obviously overcome a lot, and I think that goes to show. But I'd love to delve more into the choices you're making around how you mother. I know one of them is the screen thing. I'd love to know, you know, what it is and why you've come up with it and why it works for you.
So I was looked after a lot by my nana when I was a little. And I just want to do a quick shout out to all of the grandparents that are taking some of the work off our plates and making wider family work. So much love to the nanas out there.
Ted is with his grandparents as we speak.
Exactly. Love it.
So, mine is as well.
I adored my nana. And I had such wonderful, simple times. You know, she was from King's Cross, so she's from a very working class community, and she just took me on very kind of traditional little outings, like to the park to feed the ducks, or to have a picnic in the woods, or we'd cook something together, we'd make a soup together. And I have such lovely tender moments of doing those sorts of things with her that my parents didn't have time to do with me, because they were working really hard. trying to keep a roof over our head and everything else. But my grandma had time to do these little cute activities with me. So, and also my granddad, her husband, he was a scout leader. So they were a big believer in getting kids outdoors, even though they were living in London. So they're not talking about, kids that have got access to beautiful national parks or whatever. This is urban children. And it's still really important for urban children to have access to nature. And then my mum is a forest school teacher. So she had taken on that idea that it's important to get kids outside, and especially if you've got active kids like mine, it's really important. So I think I've just sort of followed in their footsteps. And for my own mental health, even when they're tiny, we've been outside every day, because I feel like staying in, the four walls can get a bit oppressive. And it's isolating, it's lonely. When you push the pram out to the park, you'll probably bump into someone or get chatting to someone, or, it just lightens the load a little bit. So I'm a big believer in getting kids outdoors, and I have been screen free. I'm not sure how much longer I will be able to uphold it, and I'm sure there'll become a point where all of their friends will be talking.
If you go on that holiday, you might need something on the plane.
see if we survive a flight without it. I know, but I am realistic that you can't protect kids forever.
Yeah,
but things have changed so much since I was a kid. We didn't have phones. I wasn't watching TV when I was 1, yet people think it's really strange that my kids, when they were 1, weren't watching TV. When it's like, well, I wasn't, my mum wasn't, my nana wasn't, no one else who's ever come in my family was watching telly at 1. So it's not that odd that I'm not doing it, but because it's so accepted, and I think across all communities, all classes, all races, it's just something that's screens are so widespread that saying, oh, I don't want my kids to do that yet is quite surprising for people. And I think almost it can get people on the back foot a bit, because I'd be at playgroup and mums would be saying things like, oh, I really didn't want to do it, but I just put Bluey on this morning because I couldn't get them in the pram any other way. And they're kind of looking for me to say, oh yeah, I do that too. And I'm saying, oh right, I don't do that. And that feels a bit confrontational.
I love what you said, that this idea of it's a social pressure, even if it's for screen or against screen. I don't think it's the point of what it is.
Yeah,
it's being yourself. And I'll tell you a story. Someone I was talking to someone the other day, and she said, I work for a company. I can't remember which company she works for, and she was saying how it's very normal for everyone in the company to bring a salad in for lunch. And she's a new mom. And she said, the other day I just walked in with my noodles and some thing. And everyone's looking at her like, have you got salad? And you're going to buy food and you're not making your own salad? And then she was saying how she was feeling this pressure to start making salad, even though she hasn't got time. And I was saying to her, I don't want to tell you what to do, but if I was you, I would bring rice every single day. Because I think there comes a point in life when you really have to learn to be yourself and own your decisions, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable, because otherwise you start falling for one thing, you'll fall for everything.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that's come to the fore in motherhood. You can't people please as a mother. You can't, because like I said before, if you please the breastfeeding community, then you're going to displease the bottle feeding community. If you please the kind of baby-led weaning community, then you displease the puree everything community. So you just in this damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So the only way not to lose my mind was to just say, this is how I'm doing it. And I've had plenty of pushback and plenty of opinions from people, some of whom are in the family and probably coming from a loving place, but they just don't get it. They don't get that what worked for them with their one child is not the same as my situation, and even GPs, health visitors, midwives, they don't get it either, because the suggestions that they're making to me are ridiculous. So, if you don't understand my life, then, you don't really get to judge what you think I should or shouldn't be doing. And I think this is true of every mum, because no one sees that kind of 360, 24 hours a day view of your whole family. So I might be making decisions that work for my family that are outlier decisions that don't work for other people, and they look at me like I'm an alien. But at the end of the day, margins are so tight with triplets. We've just got to do what works for us. And if other people don't like that or think I should be doing things differently, then, you know, that's really just on them. I've made a point of not listening to the shoulds. So any time someone says to you as a mum, you should, that's just stop listening at that point. You know, if you haven't specifically asked that person for their insight or their advice on something, I think just turn down the noise on it, because people come out of the woodwork that really don't understand my life, the challenges of feeding triplets every night. You know, you should be doing it like this. Oh, I wouldn't be doing it like that. You shouldn't be. In my day, we never do things like this. It's so unhelpful, I think. And
there are so few people with lived experience of triplets. Like the fact they feel like they can tell you how you should be doing it when, yeah, fair enough, you've had 3 children, but you had them at separate times. It's not the same thing at all.
No, but even if you're not having triplets, you know, everyone's different. Like a different feeding regime might work for someone, a different sleeping regime. Like you were saying about the wake windows. My cousin had an app, and it like buzzed on the phone every time. It's like, oh God, your kid should be asleep now. It's like panic, you know. It's like, well, it might not work like that, you know. Like some kids are different, and even my genetically identical boys are different. They have got different feeding needs and different sleep needs.
Because you've got 2 that are identical and 1 that isn't.
Yeah. So having that kind of comparison has shown me that, you know, it's not because, you know, of something I'm doing that is giving them a different result, because they're the same genetically, they've got the same environmental factors, and they're just different people. You know, different things work for different kids. And it's kind of like saying, well, I've managed one person, so I know how to manage everyone.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't, you know.
There's a lot about leadership in companies, you know, and just appreciating that people are different, and just like children are different, employees are different, their needs are different, what motivates them are different. So yeah, I think and I think you know, that's probably why mothers make good leaders. I think
Definitely
recognize that.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking, Tiffany, about Tiffany knows, I think, what I'm going to say here. But you and Mark were like, oh, we're just so chilled, and that's
our children are different. Like I've never seen anything like him. My son is the most sensible. Oh yes, we shouldn't do that. We should probably not listen to it. Be kind to everyone. Oh yes,
very sensible, sweet little boy.
My daughter does not care. Like she's actually teaching me how to live. We went to the sea the other day. She walked into the sea. She does not see fear. She does not see death. She doesn't see she just doesn't care. And they're so different. And I realize I have to raise them differently. I have to speak to them differently. I have to treat them differently, because they're kind of motivations and what they see. Like my son sees people's emotions. He's like, oh no, be kind to that thing. My daughter, you can tell she won't care. She'll just be like, whatever, like I'm getting my way and that's the end of it. And it's just shocking to me how different they are. And I'm like learning like how to, like I said, I need to even read books about this.
And it's not on you. It's just them. They're just different human beings. They're different spirits.
Whereas I've got one crazy wild one.
Yeah, him and her son and my daughter, they deserve each other. They're just as wild.
They're normally running off in different directions.
My son's trying to bring them together.
Yeah, I've got at least one wild one. But it's the same in the sense that he would run into danger. He finds danger thrilling, so he would run towards any kind of danger and not look back. You know, so he's the one that you need to watch in the park or whatever.
Wow.
And you were talking about when we talked to you before about the kind of things people would say to you about having triplets and that judgment, and but also that having triplets in a way was freeing, because people don't know what they're talking about, so you can just throw out the rule book and do your own thing a little bit.
That has been a blessing. So when my boys were first back from the hospital, I had a book that a friend had given me that was like what your baby should be doing every week, like the week by week developmental checks.
Wow.
And I just felt really awful every time I read it, because my boys were way behind on everything. And then after a while, I realized that, you know, this book wasn't written for me. This book isn't for people in my situation.
And not for people with premature babies, probably.
No, exactly. And actually, a lot of the apps, the very popular apps, the very popular influencers that are all telling you what you should be doing and how it should be going, you know, they're not talking about my circumstance. Like, they don't actually have a clue, like, about what my life is like. And so very early on, I just kind of ditched the whole thing. And I thought, I'm not going to listen to that, because it just makes either me feel like a failure, or it makes me feel like my babies are failing. And both of those feelings are just horrible. And, you know, you feel that you're letting everyone down, and there's like this kind of sickness and disappointment around it all. When, you know, when you've had very ill children or very premature children, like the fact that they're doing simple things like breathing unaided is a cause for celebration. Like, it doesn't matter if we're not achieving all of the milestones on the graphs and keeping up with all the other kids, like just little wins, you know, celebrate the little wins. So I just kind of ditched all of that, and it gave me the liberation, I think, to do things differently. And that's also given me the space to be so loud about mum guilt, because I'm coming at it from a slightly different perspective, because I am a bit unique, I am a bit outside situations, and because I think having 3 children at once, you get an acute dose of all of their kind of mental health issues around becoming a mum. Like, it's just physically exhausting, you're shattered, and you're kind of up against it in so many ways, that I think that unique experience has given me like a free card to just say what I want now.
I love it. What about mum guilt in the workplace?
So I think the return to work after parental leave needs to be handled thoughtfully. And there was one Friday night, which I just put a message out to the WhatsApp group I'm in of mums, and I was asking people what their experiences were of the return to work. And I was actually quite shocked at what is going on. And sometimes I think probably people aren't meaning to be discriminatory or mean. They're just not thinking about it. It's sort of not considered. And then they might say the wrong thing because they haven't really thought about what they're saying. They might not necessarily mean to be so nasty. But there were other instances of the kind of discrimination which is illegal, you know. And I live in South London, so a lot of these mum friends are working in fancy city firms, a lot of banks, insurances, you know, big fancy companies. And, you know, if you think, when you find out like what people's actual lived experience is, it's quite shocking. And sometimes mums would actually advocate for themselves. They would reach out to HR and say, someone said this thing to me, or I'm in this situation. And often that wouldn't actually help. And the fact that they've advocated for themselves, they're seen as a troublemaker. The aggressor gets to walk scot-free because they're bringing in the cash, or they've got a fancy job title, everyone's scared of them, whatever. And it doesn't necessarily help. Or there was another mum she's a single mum, and she doesn't have anyone else who can do the collection from nursery or anything else. And she was told that the fact that she's not attending out of hours work events and going on overseas trips is going to affect her promotion. So she actually reached out and asked for a mentor and said, you know, what can I do? Like, how can I progress myself? She's still working full time. It's not, you know, there's also discrimination when you cut to part time, but she's actually still in the office full time. And they were like, you know, to be honest, love, just don't even bother. You're not going to get anywhere until your kids are at school. And she was so angry. She's like, you know, I'm reaching out here. I'm still a legit player. Like, you know, I'm still important. I'm still capable of running these projects. I'm still capable. And everyone sort of pushed me to the side a bit. And I think that can be very difficult. And there's not open conversations about them.
Yeah.
So mums either feel that if they speak up, nothing good will come of it. Or they even feel guilty for needing to speak up because they don't like advocating for themselves. So instead of feeling like the culture is the problem, that's what's wrong here, they think, oh, it must be something wrong with me.
Yeah.
It must be because this thing I did isn't good enough, or it must be because I didn't perform well in this meeting. So it's just like we were saying with the miscarriage thing, you know, you internalize all of that judgment and guilt and you put it on yourself. And I think this actually is a huge problem, masking. So mums feel like they have to show up to work as if they don't have kids.
I've just written that on my bit of paper while we're talking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of women needing to work as though they're not parents, and
yeah, I think
show up as the same person when they come back.
It's a huge problem. So I was talking to a mum the other day who worked for a big luxury brand that everyone would have heard of, and her colleagues didn't know she had kids for 2 years. She'd worked at that company for 2 years before they knew she was a mum.
And was that intentional? Did she hide it?
She hadn't realised that she had.
Oh.
But in order to fit in that very masculine, competitive, stressful culture, you can't show any weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, sadly, it is still a perception that motherhood is a weakness. And this starts early. So even there've been studies done on how people feel about telling their employers they're pregnant. And people are worried about that because they know that they're going to be judged.
Yeah.
That they're going to be seen as less committed, flaky, flight risk. And so people try and carry on as if they're not pregnant. And I did this like throughout my pregnancy, which was a high risk, exhausting pregnancy. I was like, I'm fine. I can launch new products. I can run the show. I can do everything. And it was almost like I was trying to prove to myself and to everyone else that pregnancy wasn't affecting me, because I was running my own business, you know, people relying on me. And they're used to me being this very capable entrepreneur. And I didn't want to let that slip.
That's really sad, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is. And I was doing it to myself, like with the bully situation. It wasn't my colleagues saying, oh, Leila, before you go on mat leave, you need to make sure that you've executed X, Y, Z, and you need to make sure I was putting that on myself.
I wonder if it's the identity I wonder if it's sometimes this identity we build that we are our work also. I think, because I'm like that. I think I'm probably going to need some therapy at some point, but I have concluded that I have this need to prove myself. I need to be at the top of my game. So probably quite similar to you. When I was pregnant with my second child, I was running a business. And I remember I would go between like having my dressing gown on because I was so tired and cold all the time, to just putting on my blazer, and then I'll be like napping during the breaks, and when we had meetings, I'll show up and, you know, lipstick and blazers and everything. I remember I was just exhausted all the time, and I probably should have taken a bit of a break, but I just couldn't face it. I couldn't face the idea of being out in the world, not having a career, or just like taking that break. To me, it seemed lazy. It seemed like that wasn't me, because
it's so unnatural.
It's so unnatural. So it's really sad how even at a time where your body's changing, even at a time where your body should be resting, you almost feel as if you had to keep proving yourself.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just me or just you. I think a lot of mums who are pregnant at work still feel like it's going to be held against me. So I need to redouble down, make sure I'm working harder, delivering more, meeting my targets more easily, to prove that I'm still worthy of a spot here. Like, because I don't want to be sidelined.
I would say some of it is internal. Pressure, but I do think there is an external pressure, because we've all heard people say, it's like, she's the first one to ever be pregnant. And I may, I'll hold my hands up, I may have been guilty of thinking that about people like way back in the past, but actually it's the first time you've ever been pregnant, potentially. In the first trimester, when you don't even look pregnant, you are exhausted. And I think that we need to kill that. I've pulled people up for saying that about other people since, because that is where this problem starts from, of not allowing people to kind of be pregnant, to deal with and tired and the things that come with it. And I think the stuff about first trimester, I had no idea before I'd had a child that you were tired at that point.
And sick. A lot of people are being sick all the time.
Oh yeah, I remember I used to go, like, I was so tired, I would like call my nurse all the time with my second baby. So I used to Google like tired memes, and I used to like just I could relate. And I used to tell her, there's something wrong with me. She's like, no, it's normal. I'm like, no, this is not normal. I'm so tired. I can't even like function.
But this isn't talked about or supported in the workplace. At all.
It's not. And I think that the whole, the returning to work is a piece that needs to be looked at in its own right, but also the culture, the conversations, the support from when a mum says, I'm pregnant, to her employer, how that whole thing plays out, because that sets the tone for everything. And if an employer wants to set that mum up for success, to kind of invite them back into a really positive way, where it's something they're looking forward to and they're seeing as a positive part of their identity, rather than, as many mums I've had conversations with will say, I'm doing it because I have to. not because I want to. I'm not looking forward to it. You know, there's a chance for the employer to change the tone of that conversation, and that starts early. And when you gaff it up early, you know, when there are those comments. So another mum, we were talking about that first trimester, she was running out of meetings, vomiting a lot, and had some terrible comments from people who were very high up. Like, you know, that shouldn't really be happening because it's not her fault. You know, it's not, no one wants to be vomiting in a meeting, right? And it doesn't actually, it's not a reflection of how committed they are professionally. It's just they are not well at that moment in time. They're unwell. They need to go to the bathroom. You know,
you also hear people say that they're pregnant, they're not ill, they're not disabled. Like,
well, I actually thought that I got a blue badge. I was massive. I can't waddle across the car park. I need dropping off right out front.
It's just, I think what it is like, again, I was the same. I didn't appreciate it. I was like, this is what women do. Like, even pregnancy, even giving birth, I was like, oh, I thought I had a high pain threshold. I was a mess. And I was like, I can't believe this. I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I said, this is what people, like, I did not know. It's just a different chapter of life that needs a different chapter of what you need to deal with it. It's really intense. But you know what I found really helps as well, what I'm finding now with motherhood, is you have to find a community of people that are talking about this all the time, because this has helped me even building my ambition, probably even been a bit of a selfish ambition, because I realized I needed to find other women who are doing this, because otherwise I would have felt the anomaly, and I would have felt like I can't do this, I'm tired, doesn't make sense. But now that we're speaking to more women, all over my LinkedIn is flooded with women talking about mom guilt. They're talking about juggling things. They're talking about how they can't handle it. And I think by seeing more of these conversations, it's starting to make me realize this is normal and it is difficult, but maybe we can find a way through it. I don't know what you think about that as well.
Definitely. I think normalizing it and destigmatizing it. So often when I open a conversation about it, there's like a sense of relief from the other people that finally we can get to acknowledge this thing that is normally something shameful and private, and it's just tied up in this I'm not being a good enough mum feeling that we have behind closed doors at the end of the day. But actually I think it's really important to talk about it, because it's the same whether you're the CEO or the receptionist. You know, it's the same feelings that are showing up for you, and talking about it gives us a chance to look at it and think, well, what could we do differently? And I think a huge problem with working mums is the expectations. And I mentioned it a little bit about that returning to work period. You know, we need to have conversations that result in realistic expectations. So the employee and the employer are realistic about what that phase is going to look like. Because if a mum comes back thinking like she has to pretend like she hasn't been through this big life change and that she can compete with everyone else who might have been promoted, or, you know, there's been changes that happen while she's not been around, and that she is around to respond to Slacks on the work channel in the evening, and that she has to be around to do all these things. Like, mums are just making themselves ill. You know, we really need to be realistic and have honest conversations, because we absorb all those expectations. You know, we kind of take those yardsticks and say, yeah, I'll jump to that, I'll jump to that, I'll jump to that. And we don't want to have that moment where we say, hang on, I can't do it, because we think we're going to look weak, and we think we could lose our job. We think other people might get promoted above us. But actually, I think realistic expectations are the key to making this whole thing work. And that has to be a discussion that comes from, you know, both sides about how are we going to make this work. So while the mums are saying, I'm fine, there's not a problem, and the employers are saying, well, that's very convenient for us.
Right.
You know, we're not actually getting anywhere, you know?
I mean, I asked about doing a paid phased return because I was off for 18 months, because I went to my 20-week scan, was told there was something serious wrong with my baby. I didn't go back to work, apart from I did like a 2-hour-a-day handover when the pregnancy got a little bit less risky. And then my child needed surgery at a year old. So I was off a full 18 months out of the office. And I asked if I could do a paid phased return. Some of that was sick leave, you know, as well as maternity leave. And I was told, no, I could do a phased return, but I couldn't do it paid. Well, I've been off 18 months. I've been on, you know, like statutory maternity.
Yeah.
How do you expect me to do that? And then there's that period where you come back where your kids are sick all the time because they're in nursery.
Yeah. And actually, mums that have found new jobs after having their babies have said that they find that probation period very difficult because they're just dreading that call from the nursery every day, because whilst, you know, people don't know them and they haven't built relationships, they just don't want to seem kind of flaky. And it's inevitable, isn't it? Because all of our kids get sick all the time. But specifically that probationary period, they feel very nervous about it.
Talk us through your 4 steps to breaking up with mom guilt.
Well, the first step is acceptance, not expectation. And this is kind of what I've been saying about returning to work. Like the bar is sometimes so high and our reality is down here. And that means that we're just in this gulf of not good enough. We feel like we're not good enough because we're not meeting this ridiculous expectation. And whether that is, you know, having a home that looks like it does on Instagram, or, you know, making your first 6-figure launch before your kids are out of nappies, which someone told me that they did, or just being able to go on holiday, like simple things, or, you know, being able to leave the house, like whatever that expectation is versus your reality, because you can always look around you and see other people that are doing better. And it never leaves you feeling very good. So I think just being really realistic, you know, you might have thought, like I thought I would be able to still run my business and have my babies. And in the end of the day, that didn't happen. But whilst you're kind of really wedded to how you thought it was going to be, or how you thought your career was going to look, you're not giving yourself the chance to look at where you're actually at and start building out again. So that's a really important one to look out for. Next, priorities, not perfection. So I have been a perfectionist my whole life. And to be honest, in a work capacity, it works for you. You know, you deliver high quality work, people like it because you're reliable. But in motherhood, you just can't maintain it. So for me, it's been really kind of important to just think about what actually matters and get those things done in the day. Like not what matters to other people or what other people's values are. But for me, for instance, getting outside matters. So I would rather do that than clean the kitchen, you know. So that's my priority. But for someone else, you know, their priority might be, I don't know, taking their kids to music lessons, because music is a really big thing for them. So, you know, whatever your thing is, just accept that you will have to let other balls drop in order to achieve the thing that matters, because we can't keep all these balls in the air the whole time. Next, compassion, not comparison. I've referenced it a few times, but social media, Instagram in particularly, and LinkedIn actually, because on LinkedIn, everyone's like had a promotion, won an award, like got best client of a lifetime.
And they failed, but it was the best lesson they've ever had in their entire life.
I know. And like when you're sat at home in baby porridge, wondering when and how you're going to be able to return to work, like all of that self-congratulatory content can make you really feel a bit down. So I think, you know, you need to be careful about what your social media diet is. And if you're looking at things that are making you feel like a bad mum, or making you feel like you're not in the best place career-wise or whatever, just treat yourself with kindness, show yourself some love. And, you know, remember those people aren't in your situation. And then finally, to just trust your own intuition and do things your way, even if the people around you are saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, if you want to work part-time, for instance, and other people are saying, oh, no, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing full-time. Or if you want to set up your own business and people are saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that because it's too risky. You know, you are the only one that knows what's going to work for you and your family. And so really trust that intuition, even if it's telling you something wacky, like start a podcast. You know, you're the only one that really knows,
loves it.
Knows what's going on. And as I said earlier, anytime that you hear the shoulds, just turn down the volume on that, because you know so much better than anyone else does.
Love it. Let's talk about well-being. Like, oh, you're super busy. I mean, like, yeah. So how do you look after yourself? How do you find the time to just maybe not relax, not the word, but just recharge?
Yeah, well, for me, like before I had children, I always ran and I liked exercise. I particularly liked yoga. So I was keen to get back to it early on. And we had a nanny that came and helped us a few mornings a week initially from 6 till 9, so that even if I'd had a really bad night, I could sleep. Like I could get 3 hours sleep, because sometimes, you know, we'll take anything, won't we? And then after a while, when the sleep got a bit better, I used that time to go to the gym, to exercise. And I felt mum guilt for that initially, because there's this cultural idea that if you're paying for childcare, you need to be earning. And so I think, you know, mums feel like, well, unless I can make X, that means I can't afford this support. But actually, you know, I was running on empty, and I needed to recharge myself and my husband. We met at a running club. We're both very active, sporty people. And he's a nightmare to be around when he hasn't exercised. And I probably am as well, because it's such an important like tool for coping with stress, for coping with life, like mental and physical at the same time, that I have built back that time into my day. And before I was kind of physically ready to do that, I would sit and meditate for like 10 minutes. You know, some days you might only have 10 minutes, but you can still make the most of that time, rather than talking yourself out of it and thinking, well, there's so much that needs to be done in the kitchen, or I might as well get another load of laundry on. And a friend of mine had said, you know, realistically, how much difference is 10 minutes going to make to all your chores? You know, just sit down, take that 10 minutes for yourself. As mums, if we're waiting for someone else to give us permission for that, we'll be waiting forever. You know, we have to be proactive and saying, I'm doing this for me, because there's always someone else who'll come along wanting a need met. You know, we have to say, actually, I need this for me, because everyone's relying on me, you know. And I said to my husband, like, if I go down, this is going to be like the Titanic. Like, there's no one else that's going to come and step up and do what I'm doing every day. So we need to make sure I'm well enough to do this.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I really agree with that. And I think prioritizing yourself, people feel like it's really selfish, but you don't hear a lot of dads, I don't think, who would think it was wrong to take 10 minutes to themselves.
Oh, I know.
You know, my husband will still complain if he's had a bad night's sleep now. And I think, listen, mate, you don't know the half of it.
I know. I was thinking actually the other morning about the gender sleep gap. You know, is this something anyone's talking about? Because I'd had one of those mornings where one of my boys just got up at 4, you know.
As you do?
Yeah. So, you know, the husband gets up at 8, mum gets up at 4.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one in that position.
I think it happens even in houses where generally you have quite a good level of equality.
Yeah.
But I know you liked our episode on running, on Ruth and her marathons.
Yeah.
She hit her 40k before 40 target this weekend.
Oh, wow.
She's actually made 56,000 at last count, which is incredible. So huge shout out for Ruth here. And we took part. I did 4k. I walked 4k with Ted. We had an ice cream halfway around.
No, that's great. And I think it's also about role modeling. You know, if your kids can see you exercise, or if your kids can see that, oh, mummy's going to the gym, daddy's going to play tennis, like mummy's going for a run, mummy's doing yoga, like it normalizes it. Like, I'm trying to show them, like, this is the pattern, this is what we do. And like, you know, say Ted's having an ice cream, it's fine, you know, because you're showing him, like, this is what it's like, this is what's important, this is how we do it. And they pick up on everything, you know.
They do. And I've actually recently started going running. My son is 3, and he actually says he wants to go running, because I notice he likes running. Like, everyone goes running, he's running, I'm a train. And I said to him, do you want to come running with me? And we go running for 5 minutes, and he actually says to me, can we go running? We go running.
Are you trains the whole time you do it though?
Pardon?
Are you both trains the whole time?
Yeah, I couldn't go, choo there. But he loves it, and he's very good. And I realized, I mean, I started running when I was 18. I think that's when I went for my first run. That's when I realized I loved running. But my son is 3, and I'm thinking, if he can discover something about himself now, he loves. I mean, imagine the discipline, imagine the joy of discovering yourself. It's just, the earlier the better, I think. So yeah, I'm like, let's go running, and he loves it. And I think, like what you said there, it's just allowing kids to be themselves and finding things that will definitely help them. I mean, mental health and being outside. I mean, there are no like downsides to running, I think. So
yeah, exactly. And for them to understand that it's normal for
Yeah.
mums to have time to go and do this, so
Mm.
that, you know, when they're in relationships later in life, I've already set that standard that, you know, it's normal for mums to go out and do their own thing for an hour, for 2 hours, to see their own friends, to have their own hobbies. Like it's not, I don't have to be here at home, you know, doing everything all the time. I need a bit of that space for me.
Yeah, definitely. Somebody shared on LinkedIn yesterday. She's called Tamara Hinckley, and she's director of product at Pinterest. She shared a stat yesterday that working mothers spend as much time with their children as stay-at-home mothers did in the 70s.
Wow.
And that what's happened is the expectations have changed.
Yeah.
In the 70s, as long as they were fed, safe, relatively safe, I guess, because they just used to let them go out in the streets by themselves, and entertained, that was enough. Whereas now people are working full-time jobs and spending just as much time with their kids as
Yeah.
with the full-time job.
Even feeling more bad about it, probably.
Yeah.
Even though you're doing just as well. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? So we're doing just as well in terms of time with our children, if that's what we're feeling bad about, but we're feeling probably 10 times as worse about it.
Yeah, I asked my mum about this, because I said, when we were little, was there so much mum guilt? And she said no, because firstly, there was more support for mums. There were clinics, drop-in clinics that you could go to, you know, whenever, if you needed support with your own mental health, if you needed help with something practical with the kids. Like, this was just part of the community and accessible. And also, there weren't so many different ways of doing everything. So she felt like people were mostly in the same boat. Whereas now there are so many different methodologies being sold to you, so many different products, so many different approaches, that it's a lot noisier. But when you and your neighbours are pretty much all doing it in a similar sort of way, with similar sort of resources, it didn't feel like there was so much comparison. Like, you weren't aware of the people who were doing it. I don't know, like the super duper Instagram beautiful people, you know, you just saw your neighbours and that was it. So everyone kind of felt like they were a bit more in it together. Whereas I don't necessarily feel we've got that sisterhood that she had back in the 80s.
Yeah, I think that's really true.
Yeah. What are you working on at the moment? Are you doing any like projects or any
Well, last week I applied to do a TED talk on so I'm keeping everything crossed for that one. So yeah, I'm trying to raise awareness of it, because I think mum guilt is the biggest maternal mental health issue no one is talking about, and there's not that much research into it, and I don't know who cares about it enough to do the research, but I am trying to bang the drum. And in the run up to Christmas, I'm going to put on an event for festive mum guilt, because I feel like Christmas is a time when we're supposed to be able to like whip up these magical memories, as well as everything else we've already got on our plate. You know, there's a lot of people pleasing. We've got to keep this side of the family happy. We've got to keep that side of the family happy. There's so many expectations. And actually, it's not that enjoyable. A lot of the work is not that enjoyable. And if you look at the mental health stats, it's terrible. You know, Christmas is a bottleneck time of pressure on mums. And instead of kind of taking a break and looking after ourselves, we just think we should be doing more. You know, we're just kind of throwing ourselves into more commitments, more shopping, more obligations, more hosting, and it's really unhealthy. So I'm going to be talking about how to look after yourself over the festive period and be doing an event on that too.
Oh, nice. And where will people find you as well?
So I've got a website, and the newsletter is where I share kind of everything I'm doing, which is my Mama Mag, and that's Leila Green, Leila green.com/mama-mag. And yeah, I share everything I'm up to there.
Nice.
So on LinkedIn, or can people?
Yeah, I'm also on LinkedIn as Leila Green.
Okay. All right, cool.
It's
Thank
been
you.
so interesting. You've opened my eyes to all things triplets.
And it's been great to be here. I really love your vibe and your energy, and the fact that you're giving space to have these conversations. It makes a big difference.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Should we do a poll, Tiffany, as well about mum guilt, maybe?
Oh yeah.
Yes, we will. Yeah. Let's we'll end the recording here. Thanks so much for everyone taking the time to spend time with us.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.